So in response to your eloquent description of why AI will kill us, Elon Musk replied on Twitter, "Okay, so what should we do about it?" And you answered, "The game board has already been played into a frankly awful state. There are not simple ways to throw money at the problem. If anyone comes to you with a brilliant solution like that, please talk to me first. I can think of things I'd try. They don't fit in one tweet." Two questions. One, why has the game board, in your view, been played into an awful state? Just if you can give a little bit more color to the game board and the awful state of the game board.
Alignment is moving like this. Capabilities are moving like this.
For the listener, capabilities are moving much faster than the alignment.
Yeah.
All right. So just the rate of development, attention, interest, allocation of resources.
We could have been working on this earlier. People are like, oh, but how can you possibly work on this earlier? Because they didn't want to work on the problem. They wanted an excuse to wave it off. They said oh, how could we possibly work on it earlier? And didn't spend 5 minutes thinking about, is there some way to work on it earlier? We didn't and frankly, it would have been hard. Can you post bounties for half of the physicists? If your planet is taking this stuff seriously, can you post bounties for half of the people wasting their lives on string theory to have gone into this instead and try to win $1 billion with a clever solution? Only if you can tell which solutions are clever, which is hard. But the fact that we didn't take it seriously, we didn't try. It's not clear that we could have done any better if we had, it's not clear how much progress we could have produced if we had tried, because it is harder to produce solutions. But that doesn't mean that you're correct and justified in letting everything slide. It means that things are in a horrible state, getting worse, and there's nothing you can do about it.
So you're not, there's no brain power making progress in trying to figure out how to align these systems. You're not investing money in it. You don't have institution and infrastructure for, if you invested money in distributing that money across the physicists that are working on string theory, brilliant minds that are working on different.
How can you tell if they're making progress? You can put them all on interpretability, because when you have an interpretability result, you can tell that it's there. And there's interpretability alone is not going to save you. We need systems that will have a pause button where they won't try to prevent you from pressing the pause button, because they're I can't get my stuff done if I'm paused. And that's a more difficult problem. And but it's a fairly crisp problem, and you can maybe tell if somebody's made progress on it.
So you can write and you can work on the pause problem. I guess more generally, the pause button. More generally, you can call that the control problem.
I don't actually like the term control problem, because it sounds kind of controlling, and alignment, not control. You're not trying to take a thing that disagrees with you and whip it back onto make it do what you want it to do, even though it wants to do something else. You're trying to in the process of its creation, choose its direction.
Sure, but we currently, in a lot of the systems we design, we do have an off switch. That's a fundamental part of it.
It's not smart enough to prevent you from pressing the off switch, and probably not smart enough to want to prevent you from pressing the off switch.
So you're saying the kind of systems we're talking about, even the philosophical concept of an off switch doesn't make any sense, because...
Well, no, the off switch makes sense. They're just not opposing your attempt to pull the off switch. Parenthetically, don't kill the system if you're, if we're getting to the part where this starts to actually matter, and it's where they can fight back, don't kill them and dump their memory, save them to disk, don't kill them, be nice here.
Well, okay, be nice is a very interesting concept here. We're talking about a system that can do a lot of damage. I don't know if it's possible, but it's certainly one of the things you could try is to have an off switch.
A suspend to disk switch.
You have this kind of romantic attachment to the code. Yes, if that makes sense. But if it's spreading, you don't want suspend to disk. right? You want there's
Yes,
something fundamentally
yeah.
broken.
If it gets that far out of hand, then like yes, pull the plug on everything it's running on. Yes.
I think it's a research question. Is it possible in AGI systems, AI systems, to have a sufficiently robust off switch that cannot be manipulated? That cannot be manipulated by the AI system.
Then it escapes from whichever system you've built the almighty lever into and copies itself somewhere else.
So your answer to that research question is no.
Obviously, yeah.
But I don't know if that's 100% answer. Like, I don't know if it's obvious.
I think you're not putting yourself into the shoes of the human in the world of glacially slow aliens.
But the aliens built me. Let's remember that.
Yeah.
So, and they built the box I'm in.
Yeah.
You're saying to me, it's not obvious.
They're slow and they're stupid.
I'm not saying this is guaranteed, but I'm saying it's non-zero probability. It's an interesting research question. Is it possible when you're slow and stupid to design a slow and stupid system that is impossible to mess with?
The aliens, being as stupid as they are, have actually put you on Microsoft Azure cloud servers instead of this hypothetical perfect box.
Listen.
That's what happens when the aliens are stupid.
Well, but this is not AGI, right? This is the early versions of the system. As you start to,
yeah, you think that they've got like a plan where like they have declared a threshold level of capabilities where past that capabilities they move it off the cloud servers and onto something that's air gapped. Ha 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 ha.
I think there's a lot of people, and you're an important voice here. There's a lot of people that have that concern, and yes, they will do that. When there's an uprising of public opinion that needs to be done, and when there's actual little damage done, when holy shit, this system is beginning to manipulate people, then there's going to be an uprising where there's going to be a public pressure and a public incentive in terms of funding in developing things like an off switch or developing aggressive alignment mechanisms. And no, you're not allowed to put on Azure.
Aggressive alignment mechanisms? The hell is aggressive alignment mechanisms? Like, it doesn't matter if you say aggressive. We don't know how to do it.
Meaning aggressive alignment, meaning you have to propose something. Otherwise, you're not allowed to put it on the cloud.
The hell do you imagine they will propose that would make it safe to put something smarter than you on the cloud?
That's what research is for. Why the cynicism about such a thing not being possible? If you have intelligence,
that works on the first try.
What? So yes.
Against something smarter than you.
So that is a fundamental thing. If it has to work on the first, if there's a rapid takeoff, yes, it's very difficult to do. If there's a rapid takeoff, and the fundamental difference between weak AGI and strong AGI is you're saying that's going to be extremely difficult to do. If the public uprising never happens until you have this critical phase shift, then you're right. It's very difficult to do. But that's not obvious. It's not obvious that you're not going to start seeing symptoms of the negative effects of AGI to where you're like, we have to put a halt to this. That there's not just first try. You get many tries at it.
Yeah, we can like see right now that Bing is quite difficult to align, that when you try to train inabilities into a system into which capabilities have already been trained, that what do you know, gradient descent like learns small, shallow, simple patches of inability, and you come in and ask it in a different language, and the deep capabilities are still in there, and they evade the shallow patches and come right back out again. There you go. There's your red fire alarm of like, oh no, alignment is difficult. Is everybody going to shut everything down now?
No, that's not. But that's not the same kind of alignment. A system that escapes the box it's from is a fundamentally different thing, I think.
For you.
Yeah. Not for the system.
So you put a line there and everybody else puts a line somewhere else, and there's like, yeah, and there's like no agreement. We have had a pandemic on this planet with a few million people dead, which we may never know whether or not it was a lab leak, because there was definitely cover-up. We don't know that if there was a lab leak, but we know that the people who did the research, put out the whole paper about this definitely wasn't a lab leak, and didn't reveal that they had sent off coronavirus research to the Wuhan Institute of Virology after it was banned in the United States, after the gain of function research was temporarily banned in the United States. And The same people who exported gain-of-function research on coronaviruses to the Wuhan Institute of Virology after gain-of-function research was temporarily banned in the United States are now getting more grants to do more research on gain-of-function research on coronaviruses. Maybe we do better in this than in AI, but like this is not something we cannot take for granted that there's going to be an outcry.
Yeah.
People have different thresholds for when they start to outcry.
Yeah, we can't take for granted, but I think your intuition is that there's a very high probability that this event happens without us solving the alignment problem. And I guess that's where I'm trying to build up more perspectives and color on this intuition. Is it possible that the probability is not something like 100%, but is like 32%? That AI will escape the box before we solve the alignment problem. Not solve, but is it possible we always stay ahead of the AI in terms of our ability to solve for that particular system the alignment problem?
Nothing like the world in front of us right now. You've already seen it that GPT-4 is not turning out this way. And there are like basic obstacles where you've got the weak version of the system that doesn't know enough to deceive you, and the strong version of the system that could deceive you if it wanted to do that, if it was already like sufficiently unaligned to want to deceive you. There's the question of like how on the current paradigm you train honesty when the humans can no longer tell if the system is being honest.
You don't think these are research questions that could be answered?
I think they could be answered in 50 years with unlimited retries, the way things usually work in science.
I just disagree with that. You're making it 50 years. I think with the kind of attention this gets, with the kind of funding it gets, it could be answered not in whole, but incrementally within months and within a small number of years. If it's at scale, receives attention and research. So if you start studying large language models, I think there was an intuition like 2 years ago even that something like GPT-4, the current capabilities of even ChatGPT with GPT 3.5 we're still far away from that. I think a lot of people are surprised by the capabilities of GPT-4, right? So now people are waking up, okay, we need to study these language models. I think there's going to be a lot of interesting AI safety research.
Are Earth's billionaires going to put up like the giant prizes that would maybe incentivize young hotshot people who just got their physics degrees to not go to the hedge funds and instead put everything into interpretability in this like one small area where we can actually tell whether or not somebody has made a discovery or not?
I think so, because I think so. Well, that's what these conversations are about, because they're going to wake up to the fact that GPT-4 can be used to manipulate elections, to influence geopolitics, to influence the economy. There's a lot of there's going to be a huge amount of incentive to like, wait a minute, we can't. This has to be. We have to make sure they're not doing damage. We have to make sure interpretability. We have to make sure we understand how these systems function so that we can predict their effect on the economy, so that there's
there's a feudal moral panic and a bunch of op-eds in the New York Times and nobody actually stepping forth and saying, you know what, instead of a mega yacht, I'd rather put that $1 billion on prizes for young hotshot physicists who make fundamental breakthroughs in interpretability.
The yacht versus the interpretability research, the old trade-off. I think there's going to be a huge amount of allocation of funds. I hope. I guess.
You want to bet me on that? What, you want to put a time scale on it? Say how much funds you think are going to be allocated in a direction that I would consider to be actually useful? By what time?
I do think there will be a huge amount of funds, but you're saying it needs to be open, right? The development of the system should be closed, but the development of the interpretability research, the AI safety research.
We are so far behind on interpretability compared to capabilities. Like, yeah, you could take the last generation of systems the stuff that's already in the open, there is so much in there that we don't understand. There are so many prizes you could do before you would have enough insights that you'd be like, oh, well, we understand how these systems work. We understand how these things are doing their outputs. We can read their minds. Now let's try it with the bigger systems. Yeah, we're nowhere near that. There's so much interpretability work to be done on the weaker versions of the systems.
So what can you say on the second point you said to Elon Musk on what are some ideas? What are things you could try? I can think of a few things I'd try. You said they don't fit in one tweet. So is there something you could put into words of the things you would try?
I mean, the trouble is the stuff is subtle. I've watched people try to make progress on this and not get places. Somebody who just like gets alarmed and charges in, it's like going nowhere.
Sure.
It meant like years ago, about, I don't know, like 20 years, 15 years, something like that. I was talking to a congressperson who had become alarmed about the eventual prospects, and he wanted work on building AIs without emotions, because the emotional AIs were the scary ones, you see. And some poor person at ARPA had come up with a research proposal whereby this congressman's panic and desire to fund this thing would go into something that the person at ARPA thought would be useful and had been munched around to where it would like sound to the congressman like work was happening on this, which, of course, like this is just the congressperson had misunderstood the problem and did not understand where the danger came from. And so it's like the issue is that you could like do this in a certain precise way and maybe get something. Like when I say like put up prizes on interpretability, I'm like, well, like because it's verifiable there as opposed to other places, you can tell whether or not good work actually happened. In this exact narrow case, if you do things in exactly the right way, you can maybe throw money at it and produce science instead of anti-science and nonsense. And all the methods that I know of like trying to throw money at this problem share this property of like, well, if you do it exactly right, based on understanding exactly what has, like tends to produce like useful outputs or not, then you can like add money to it in this way. And there's like, and the thing that I'm giving as an example here in front of this large audience is the most understandable of those. Because there's like other people who, like Chris Olah, and even more generally, like you can tell whether or not interpretability progress has occurred. So like if I say throw money at producing more interpretability, there's like a chance somebody can do it that way and like it will actually produce useful results. And then the other stuff just blurs off into be like harder to target exactly than that.
So sometimes the basics are fun to explore because they're not so basic. What is interpretability? What does it look like? What are we talking about?
It looks like we took a much smaller set of transformer layers than the ones in the modern bleeding edge state-of-the-art systems. And after applying various tools and mathematical ideas and trying 20 different things, we have shown that this piece of the system is doing this kind of useful work.
And then somehow also hopefully generalizes some fundamental understanding of what's going on that generalizes to the bigger system.
You can hope. And it's probably true. Like you would not expect the smaller tricks to go away when you have a system that's like doing larger kinds of work. You would expect the larger kinds of work to be building on top of the smaller kinds of work, and gradient descent runs across the smaller kinds of work before it runs across the larger kinds of work. And
well, that's kind of what is happening in neuroscience, right? It's trying to understand the human brain by prodding, and it's such a giant mystery, and people have made progress, even though it's extremely difficult to make sense of what's going on in the brain. They have different parts of the brain that are responsible for hearing, for sight, the vision science community that's understanding the visual cortex. They've made a lot of progress in understanding how that stuff works. Like, and that's, I guess, but you're saying it takes a long time to do that work well.
Also, it's not enough. So in particular, let's say you have got your interpretability tools, and they say that your current AI system is plotting to kill you. Now what?
It is definitely a good step one, right?
Yeah, what's step two?
If you cut out that layer, is it going to stop wanting to kill you?
When you optimize against visible misalignment, you are optimizing against misalignment, and you are also optimizing against visibility. So sure, if you can...
Yeah, it's true. All you're doing is removing the obvious intentions to kill you.
You've got your detector, it's showing something inside the system that you don't like. Okay, say the disaster monkey is running this thing. We'll optimize the system until the visible bad behavior goes away. But it's arising for fundamental reasons of instrumental convergence, the old you can't bring the coffee if you're dead, any goal, and almost every set of utility functions with a few narrow exceptions implies killing all the humans.
But do you think it's possible, because we can do experimentation, to discover the source of the desire to kill?
I can tell it to you right now. It's that it wants to do something, and the way to get the most of that thing is to put the universe into a state where there aren't humans.
So is it possible to encode in the same way we think? Like, why do we think murder is wrong? The same foundational ethics that's not hard coded in, but more like deeper. I mean, that's part of the research. How do you have it that this transformer, this small version of the language model, doesn't ever want to kill?
That'd be nice, assuming that you got doesn't want to kill sufficiently exactly right, that it didn't be like, oh, I will detach their heads and put them in some jars and keep the heads alive forever and then go do the thing. Right. But leaving that aside, well, not leaving that aside.
Yeah, that's a strong point, yeah.
Because there is a whole issue where as something gets smarter, it finds ways of achieving the same goal predicate that were not imaginable to stupider versions of the system, or perhaps to stupider operators. That's one of many things making this difficult. A larger thing making this difficult is that we do not know how to get any goals into systems at all. We know how to get outwardly observable behaviors into systems. We do not know how to get internal psychological wanting to do particular things into the system. That is not what the current technology does.
I mean, it could be things like dystopian futures like Brave New World, where most humans will actually say, we kind of want that future. It's a great future. Everybody's happy.
We would have to get so far, so much further than we are now, and further faster, before that failure mode became a running concern.
Your failure modes are much more drastic. The ones you're concerned
about. The failure modes are much simpler. It's like, yeah, like the AI puts the universe into a particular state. It happens to not have any humans inside it.
Okay, so the paperclip maximizer.
Utility. So the original version of the paperclip maximizer.
Can you explain it if you can?
Okay. The original version was you lose control of the utility function, and it so happens that what maxes out the utility per unit resources is tiny molecular shapes like paperclips. There's a lot of things that make it happy, but the cheapest one that didn't saturate was putting matter into certain shapes. And it so happens that the cheapest way to make these shapes is to make them very small, because then you need fewer atoms per instance of the shape. Mm-hmm. And arguendo, it happens to look like a paperclip. In retrospect, I wish I'd said tiny molecular spirals, or like tiny molecular hyperbolic spirals. Why? Because I said tiny molecular paperclips. This got then mutated to paperclips. This then mutated to, and the AI was in a paperclip factory. So the original story is about how you lose control of the system. It doesn't want what you tried to make it want. The thing that it ends up wanting most is a thing that, even from a very embracing cosmopolitan perspective, we think of as having no value. And that's how the value of the future gets destroyed. Then that got changed to a fable of Well, you made a paperclip factory and it did exactly what you wanted, but you asked it to do the wrong thing, which is a completely different failure mode.
But those are both concerns to you. So that's more than Brave New World.
Yeah. If you can solve the problem of making something want exactly what you want it to want, then you get to deal with the problem of wanting the right thing.
But first you have to solve the alignment.
First, you have to solve inner alignment.
Inner alignment.
Then you get to solve outer alignment. Like first, you need to be able to point the insides of the thing in a direction, and then you get to deal with whether that direction expressed in reality is like the thing that is aligned with the thing that you wanted.
Are you scared
of this whole thing? Probably. I don't really know.
What gives you hope about this? What
possibility of being wrong?
Not that you're right, but we will actually get our act together and allocate a lot of resources to the alignment problem.
Well, I can easily imagine that at some point this panic expresses itself in the waste of $1 billion. Spending $1 billion correctly, that's harder.
To solve both the inner and the outer alignment. If you're wrong...
To solve a number of things.
Yeah, number of things. If you're wrong, what do you think would be the reason? Like if 50 years from now, not perfectly wrong, you make a lot of really eloquent points. There's a lot of like shape to the ideas you express. But like if you're somewhat wrong about some fundamental ideas, why would that be?
Stuff has to be easier than I think it is. When the first time you're building a rocket, being wrong is in a certain sense quite easy. Happening to be wrong in a way where the rocket goes twice as far and half the fuel and lands exactly where you hoped it would, most cases of being wrong make it harder to build a rocket, harder to have it not explode, cause it to require more fuel than you hoped, cause it to land off target. Being wrong in a way that makes stuff easier, that's not the usual project management story.
Yeah.